Hello and welcome back to Processing the Process, where we capture and discuss the technical, psychological, and contextual dynamics that shape the process of creating a work of art, whether in the performing arts or in a business environment. We are delighted that Anthony Mangone, owner of Trattoria 632 in Purchase, New York, has joined our Process in Real-Time team of creators to explore the development of a sole proprietor-owned retail business. Our collaboration provides insight into the internal struggles and external circumstances that shape the creation of a thriving retail restaurant business. As we process the process in our videocasts, Anthony and I illuminate the constantly shifting context within which the sole proprietor operates. Now, on the surface, it seems that the performing arts and the business environment are worlds apart. But in fact, the underlying dynamics are really similar. Essentially, Ali, Jonathan, and Anthony are all artists. They just create in different media. So week by week, we follow Anthony as he navigates the dynamics impacting the development of Trattoria 632. Today, we'll find out how Anthony's family influenced his whole way of operating. We'll see how he wove together his early political experiences with college, law school, and corporate work. We will get a rare glimpse into the inner workings of the political world and see how it fueled Anthony's meteoric rise and, unfortunately, a catastrophic fall. But how all of this ultimately led, believe it or not, Anthony into the restaurant business. So with that, going back into the early years, Anthony, I know that you grew up in Yonkers with your older brother Frank and younger brother Michael.
That's correct.
And I think that one of the things that struck me most when you and I were speaking about it earlier is the incredible work ethic that your parents instilled in you and your brothers. Can you describe how this manifested in your early years?
You know, I had parents that were hardworking people. My mother and father, were always at work, which left us to be home alone.
Right.
Not that we ever missed out on anything, but we would go to school, come home, take care of ourselves. At an early age, we all had jobs. Both of my brothers started out working in a bagel business. I started out in a paper route, exceeded on to working in a pharmacy. And lo and behold, we made sure that we were always working. There was never going to be a time when somebody was just sitting around. Much different generation today, obviously.
Very much so. And of course, I shouldn't say of course, you started at Pace University, but after 2 years, a traumatic event changed your trajectory. And here's an early example of external circumstances impacting your path. Could you describe the event and the fallout?
Sure. You know, I was happy at Pace in Pleasantville, and I had an older brother who was going into his senior year of Manhattan College. My father's business had struggled. He had an unfortunate event. I believe at one point in time there was a fire at his office, caused his business to shut down for a period of time. My parents came to me and said, after they had already paid an enormous amount of tuition to send me and my two brothers to a very expensive Catholic high school, they just were in a tough spot at that time financially.
Of course.
They advised me that it was probably not going to work, that I'd be able to go to school that semester. And at that point, as dejected as I was, I went out, I figured out an opportunity working at IBM, took the semester off, was able to get back into SUNY Purchase, which is now located right across the street from us.
Right.
And was able to get back on a more diligent path with going to work full-time and going to school full-time.
Exactly. Well, here we see, again, an early example of that perseverance that is really a hallmark of your way of operating. And I am going to guess that it really enabled you to survive.
I would say so. You know, whenever you have to go out and take responsibility for making sure that your education is going to be paid for, that you have, you know, your daily essentials needed in terms of having money in your pocket, and it becomes a game of survival.
Right.
And survival, I'll tell you, is a wonderful motivator. And I was able to adapt well in those circumstances, figuring out how to make sure that my schedule complied with satisfying my work requirements,
right,
and also satisfying my educational requirements. So it wasn't easy. Looking back, when I think about it, and I look at my own children's lifestyle, I sit there and somewhat I laugh because here I was working a 40-hour work week and taking on a full-time school schedule.
Exactly.
So, but I believe those were the cornerstones of what eventually led to where I'm at now.
Without question. And when this, you know, unfortunate situation with the family business first happened, you actually figured out a way to get into politics. Can you describe for us those first 2 years and what you did and who you met?
It was approximately 1992. In fact, it was the year in which President Clinton defeated George Bush the first.
Right.
And I had gotten interested in that political cycle. At the same time, there were a lot of gang violence going on in the city of Yonkers.
Yes.
And I had an interest in local civics. I was able to be introduced to a very dominant Republican political family in the city of Yonkers. Started interacting with one of the younger members of the family who was an elected official at the time. Started to express some of my ideas on what I believed would be helpful to the local community, right, in addressing some of the gang violence. And from there, our relationship blossomed.
Exactly. And I understand that relationship developed great strength over time. And in fact, this gentleman and his brother became your mentors in the field.
In the political realm, there were no better mentors. His brother was a state senator, Senator Nick Spano, tremendously intelligent, tremendous political instincts. They were a family who took local politics and made it an art form.
Yes.
So very much like you had discussed in your opening, there are so many different ways to operate a political operation. These guys ran it professionally, and they ran it like their family. They were a very large family. They were there were 16 brothers and sisters, and they made sure that the entire community became part of their family. That's how they operated.
Wow, most unusual.
It is.
I would imagine.
Yeah, you know, they call it, you know, door-to-door politics. They made sure they shook a lot of hands and made sure that they resolved everybody's problems.
What a great experience. And I know after about 2 years, you did, as you told us, you returned to undergrad at SUNY Purchase,
yes,
as he said, full-time, while working at IBM,
yes,
full-time, and still managing to continue your political volunteer work.
Correct.
And I think we see once again how driven you were by that work ethic you described and obviously internalized. Anthony then attended St. John's Law School and moved forward into local politics.
Correct. Continued to have to be, went to school at nighttime, which is never an easy task. It was a 4-night-a-week classes, 2 classes an evening, but worked full-time for state government. I was chief of staff to Senator Spano's office for a period of time. a tremendous workload, but also a tremendous opportunity to meet some tremendous people,
Right.
meet people who were highly influential, and it worked to my betterment to be able to interact with so many different professionals at so many different levels,
Exactly.
from local communities to state budget issues to state social issues. I was able to interact on so many different levels, and I think it gave me, again, helped broaden the base of what I became later on in life, in terms of being able to be, in some ways, change directions quickly,
Yes.
be able to have vast knowledge on certain issues. I think that it all started there from the political level.
Absolutely. But you did decide to start your law career at a firm in New York.
That's correct. So once I had graduated law school, took the bar exam, I had a tremendous opportunity to work at a law firm that was known as Rubenbaum in the city. Mm-hmm. And it gave me the necessary intangibles for a young lawyer to learn how to practice law.
Sure.
In as much as I miss being involved politically, I realized that in order for me to pursue my law career and broaden my skills, I needed to have that interaction. I needed to be able to have that learning experience, and I started there.
But you decided that you really eventually wanted to be that kind of a bigger fish in a small pond, so that just took you away from New York.
Yeah, in some ways, it probably was a little short-sighted on my side. I probably should have stayed a little bit longer and honed my skills more in New York. But I eventually came back up to Westchester to work for a politically connected law firm.
Right.
And started to be able to access both my legal skills, my political skills, and move forward in my practice.
Exactly. So essentially, as you began your career as an attorney, as you continued your career as a politician, key philosophies and approaches were emerging, which you started to refer to, fueled, I'm sure, by both your personal and professional mentors.
Absolutely. Opportunities became abundant. People knowing me from the political spectrum came to me for legal advice. I was able to develop a very large clientele as a result of the relationships that I had encountered, and there started to be a mediatric rise towards, what appeared to be a very blossoming career.
Right.
in the legal field.
It seems from everything you've told me, you were clearly bitten by the political bug early on.
Absolutely. It's someone once told me a very long time ago that the way to get politics out of your blood is formaldehyde.
Oh,
and
God.
that was a local joke from a longtime political kingpin in Yonkers, who has since passed on, but that's what he said. That's the way to get rid of politics in your blood, is formaldehyde.
Oh my gosh. You, in describing it to me, called it a huge adrenaline rush.
Tremendous adrenaline rush. There is nothing more euphoric than to be involved in a political campaign and be able to see the good work that you do and how it turns into positive ratings in terms of poll numbers or getting someone elected. Mm-hmm. It gives you a feeling of, as I used the word before, kingpin. I don't know if that's the right word, but perhaps a difference maker.
And I remember being struck by your, in describing that realm, as coming to understand the importance of being authentic and really seeing what goes on as an organic process.
Absolutely. The one thing about politics, even in today, is it's influenced by the circumstances that are before you. There is nobody that sits there and has a crystal ball as to what's can be anticipated, particularly over the past 18 months. But we were able to work hand in hand with the community and figure out what needed to be done to make sure that we were successful, but also that we were a difference maker in the community.
Exactly. And the two, it seems to me, are absolutely inextricably
Always.
linked.
Absolutely.
So, okay, you were clearly intoxicated by politics. And eventually, though, maybe inevitably, you were exposed to its underbelly.
Correct.
Deal-making permeated by corruption. Now, most of the general public have some knowledge in bits and pieces of this kind of environment, but you were an insider, fully immersed in a culture that was really, in which unsavory and unethical behaviors were commonplace. And you once described it to me, I'll never forget this, as toiling in disgusting circles. So can you describe specific circumstances that you experienced that would illuminate that culture and unfortunately resulted in tragic consequences for you?
It became so commonplace to be involved in deal making in politics that you lose the forest for the trees,
Right.
as they say.
Right.
Give you an example. We had at one point in time a chief judge in the state of New York, Jonathan Lippman, and he was never elected. He was appointed, and he would not stay in the position unless he was elected. So we created a new judgeship, a new state Supreme Court judgeship, and leaders from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party got together, and we horse traded, and we said, okay, we're going to give him an uncontested race, he's going to get an uncontested race, and he'll wind up getting an uncontested race. Doesn't seem particularly nefarious, but when you go to the polls and you go and think you're pulling a lever as to who you believe you're electing, the reality is the decision's already been made for you. So it kind of underscores the entire electoral process in some respects. So that was just one example. It was permeated with just constant deal making.
Wow.
That unfortunately the public is not particularly aware of.
Exactly.
Having had that experience now, when I see local things going on, or even nationally, you can almost read the tea leaves as to where the deal was made.
Mm-hmm. Then what happened with you? What circumstance that involved you personally really was the defining moment, an example of this kind of environment?
So I clearly had bad judgment, and I think that the bad judgment likely stemmed from constantly being around in that toiling, disgusting environment, and thinking that it was just appropriate to be able to do things that blurred the lines of illegality. I had represented a client who was going through a real estate development process. He had come to retain me. I reached out to a local politician who was holding the project up, heard back from a political mentor of that elected official, and was told that she wanted money in order to change her vote. And instead of having the good judgment to walk away, or in the alternative, speak to someone in law enforcement, I chose the path of advising my client of what they wanted.
Right.
And my client decided that it was a good idea to move forward and provide this elected official with money so that they could move their project along. And I participated in that, and ultimately that led to an FBI investigation in which I was indicted, eventually pled guilty, convicted, and sentenced to prison.
Wow. I mean, as you said, you're so bright, so experienced, an attorney on top of it. I think it really shows us just how immersed in that swampy culture you had become, because I was wondering at what point in that process did it even occur to you that something was amiss?
You know, it probably occurred to me, quite frankly, the day in which my clients came to me to deliver the cash payment to the elected official. And at that point in time, I said, this doesn't seem, I know this is not right. I know this is not right. And I guess at that point, my moral compass had been so skewed that,
Right.
you know, you forget what you had learned, the upbringing that I had of two hardworking parents who had never done anything wrong in their lives, having, you know, been brought up in a Catholic school environment, having gotten the best education, and knowing what was right from wrong, and I had just gone off the rails, as they say.
Right.
And made a very, very, very poor decision. But I think the poor decision laid in the fact that there had been so many different encounters that I had had where it just seemed commonplace to be involved in something underhanded. Whether it was from a deal for a judge, or it was involved in another type of political deal, or, you know, being able to influence grants to certain people. It was selling. Yeah, that's what it was. That's the correct word. And it was just everywhere, so that you almost forget that this is wrong, what you're doing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And yet, in our conversations, obviously, these many years later, you have been emphatic about taking ownership and responsibility for that, for what you did, even though it was so, you know, business as usual in that culture.
That's the only way you can grow as a human being, is to be able to understand where you've made mistakes. And I've made plenty of them. I've often tell my kids I've made enough mistakes for 3 lifetimes instead of 1. So you have to own it. You have to accept responsibility for your actions. Otherwise, you're never going to grow as a human being.
Meanwhile, this crisis has a devastating impact on your life. Yet it eventually led to your owning your own restaurant. Can you describe a little bit about what toll it took and how it led to Trattoria 632?
Well, it starts, honestly, on the day of my arrest, which was January 6th of 2010. And as I'm in the back seat of a FBI car with handcuffs on me, I know my life is changed, that this is going to leave an indelible mark on my life. Things are going to change dramatically for me in every respect possible. And I realize that based on my legal experience, it's likely not going to end well for me in terms of how the case is going to play out. And as I'm in the back seat of the car, I start saying, what's next? And the months after my arrest, and having spent a lot of dark moments by myself, I started to think, what can I do? A lot of people run away from you when you're in trouble, so you realize you're on an island, and you have to figure out, what can I do to help myself, and start to think about different opportunities. Happened to have been driving by this location. It was a cold and rainy March day. The location was closed. I had learned that it was closed due to a health department violation. I reached out to the landlord. The landlord told me that the tenant was in arrears on his rent, that they would likely not be reopened, and once that happened, he would entertain me speaking to him about opening up a restaurant. Those negotiations went on for approximately 4 months, and I think by the end of June of 2010, we had executed a letter of intent and eventually executed a lease in August of 2010.
Exactly. which was great, except you didn't have any restaurant experience. What did you do so that you could come up to speed in this new business?
I reached out to two former clients who were both in the food service business. I believed that they were people that I could rely upon to get me up to speed and bring them in as partners. We formed a partnership, and we moved forward in opening up at that particular time, a pizzeria Italian restaurant. And I say that because I believe that over the years, our genre of restaurant has changed from pizzeria Italian restaurant to Italian restaurant / pizzeria, and there is a distinct difference.
Right. And you soon discovered, I think, that, and you were alluding to this a little bit earlier in the videocast, that despite being a so-called neophyte in the business, so many of your skills and experiences from your days in politics and as an attorney were actually completely transferable. And we'll be getting into that in much greater depth, moving forward. But lo and behold, it wasn't, I think, as much of a foreign world as you might have thought.
Well, obviously, there's always a concern when you start a new process, but politics is a retail business, and this is a retail business, and ultimately, whether it's customer service and making sure a table is attended to, or a customer leaves happy, or the juxtaposed position with respect to politics, making sure that your constituency supports you and making sure that you're doing what needs to be done in order to gain their support, they kind of intertwine with one another.
Right.
And so when we opened in December of 2010, after we had done a major renovation, I quickly started to realize how important it was to retain customers.
Yes.
Which is, in politics, it's about retaining the base, retaining the support in your base. Because when you lose your base, you lose your election.
Right.
Same holds true here in the restaurant industry. When you lose your base support, when you lose those customers that are here for you in and out throughout the years, whether it be the worst of times or the best of times, and you lose your consistency, that eventually leads to the downfall of any business, whether it's the restaurant business or any business.
Exactly. And you told me that after you opened in December of 2010, the restaurant became quite popular and that had a lot of great energy. And yet the next few years were an almost unbelievable roller coaster ride.
To say the least.
And starting with a dive.
Well, the first particular downfall starts some 6 weeks after we're open. So we open up and it is hot as a firecracker in here and you can't get in. And there are people calling for reservations and they want to come to this new restaurant. And January 21st of 2011, I leave here approximately 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I'm the last person to leave. I get a call a half hour later from the local police department that the building is on fire. Raced here. Remember coming up to the scene of, it was a tremendously cold night, seeing firefighters spraying water and the street being a complete sheet of ice as they battled the flames. And I just had, all you could do at that point is just break down. I had tears coming down my eyes saying that, sometimes you almost feel snake bit that you had this opportunity come. It looked like it was going to be a tremendous success.
Right.
And then you get hit with a fire. We had renovated the entire building prior to the fire, obviously, and before we reopened. The only thing that we had not renovated was the boiler. And the boiler was, from what we were told, brand new. It was a state-of-the-art boiler. The prior owner had put it in. But when they put the new boiler in, they never changed the sleeve in the flue. And so on that particular evening, the boiler was running, there was a void in the flue, and the fire was actually burning inside the walls while people were sitting here. And the only reason why there was no smoke was because the exhaust fans were on from the pizza oven and the kitchen. And so people were sitting here having a good time, and the place was burning.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And how awful to be essentially re-traumatized. Both you and your father lost your businesses to fire. But again, you pushed forward, you rebuilt, you reopened in August of 2011. But incredibly, and we're beginning to see a little pattern here, unfortunately, tragedy struck 1 month later.
Yeah. It was September 11, 2011. I was upstairs. I'll never forget where I was. I was in my office, and my father called to tell me that my brother Michael, my younger brother, had perished in a car accident.
God. And
it was just a complete punch to the gut. He was 35 years old, 3 children. You don't know how to react because it's something that you can't be prepared for. And here I am in my own disaster of being under indictment, just having started to reopen a restaurant. This happens, and now my world once again is in chaos.
Right.
And it takes a lot to keep hitting all these different, falling down these stairs all these times, and at some point you just want to just give up.
Well, of course, and yet, not surprisingly, that is not what happened. And you, as you told me, I mean, it was amazing because after the funeral, you had to come right back here to the restaurant and deal with many, many things, including serious conflicts with your partners that you felt were imperiling the business.
Partners are always difficult. Somebody told me one time, partners are only good in odd numbers, and 3's too many. So I was dealing with someone who had a very old-fashioned restaurant mentality where the customer is not necessarily always right.
Right.
And believed that his way was the only correct way, and was not listening to the heartbeat of the business.
Right.
So again, going back to where I started way back before, which is in politics, there's no crystal ball. You listen to what the community's telling you. You listen, and you have to adapt to the circumstances.
That change quite
Correct.
often, I would imagine.
So,
yes.
To give you an example, in the restaurant business years ago, it used to be apropos to use a lot of creams with fish.
Right.
Today, there's a health craze. People don't want cream with fish. In this particular example, to give you just a very small anecdote of where we were inherently conflicted,
Right.
He didn't want to put chicken parmesan on the menu. And I had said to him, I believe that it's going to be, if we put chicken parmesan on the menu, it's going to be a hit. And he said, that's not authentic Italian food. I said, I would probably agree with you in some respects, but you have to listen to the heartbeat of your constituency.
Right.
He wanted to put it on. He wanted to put it on only with vegetables. People would come in and, of course, would order and say, can I have pasta with it instead of vegetables? And he wanted to take a position, no substitutions. And I said, Stan, it's never going to work for you to say no substitutions, because we happen to live in a community that is probably upper middle class. People are financially stable. They can go anywhere they like. And to turn around and tell someone that you can only have mixed vegetables with their chicken parmesan when they're accustomed to having pasta with it and there being no substitutions, we're going to chase away our customers. And we're just starting out in business, and I'm telling you, it's going to be problematic. it was every day, it was a conflict. It was whether it was someone wanted lemon with their water and he wanted to charge them extra for it. And it was all of these different things that I felt just internally, not having any experience in the restaurant business, that these were going to be things that turned customers away.
Right.
After a short period of time, I spoke with my other partner. I said, this guy is not going to last here. He doesn't understand the concept of what we're dealing with. He doesn't understand the community here. And if he's not going to adapt, it's going to cause us to dissolve. We figured out quickly. We were able to do a buyout quickly, and lo and behold, moved forward, thankfully, without him, and tried to get the restaurant to a point where we got back on track.
Thank God, because around that time, November 2011.
I pled guilty to my case. I pled guilty to various bribery and tax counts in connection with my prior law firm, and realized at that particular moment that it was going to be problematic for me one way or the other. It was not going to end well. Whether it was going to end eventually in a prison sentence or not, I didn't know. I had to anticipate that, and had that hovering over me, that I had pled guilty to a crime.
And yet, you had to keep a business running.
Correct.
How did you do that?
Well, we go back to, again, everything starts, the cornerstones of survival and working.
Yep.
And knowing that I had a tremendous work acumen from a young child based on the support and guidance of my parents, went back and said, there's no time to grieve. There's no time to sit there and have a pity party. You have to sit there and move forward. And you have to be able to compartmentalize your issues and adapt to the circumstances. And I think that by being able to compartmentalize your problems, my problems, I think that helped me learn this business for the better. Because on any particular day in this business, you could have 30 problems.
Right.
And you have to be able to prioritize which one needs to be addressed immediately in order for the business to operate as a symphony. And that's what's required in this business. When most people walk through the door, they don't know what they're walking into.
Of course.
They just think they're coming in for a meal, but everything has to run the right way. And I think that by being able to compartmentalize my problems in November of 20 and January of 2011, and obviously the death of my brother in September of 2011, all of those different circumstances helped me build this business. Those experiences ultimately helped me build this business, because when you have to deal with those type of stressful circumstances, compartmentalize them, give them obviously the attention they need, you're able to hone those skills and be able to take them into this environment and be able to understand what is necessary in order to make this place work. And it's not an easy undertaking.
No, and you really had enough, obviously, clarity of thought to recognize, as you told me, that there were many managerial, financial, delivery, and culinary problems even after you bought out your other partner.
Yes.
And how did you ultimately handle that?
So I'm a numbers person, and at the end of the day, numbers don't lie. We were open in 2012. We had done well, but 2013, I started to look at the numbers. They weren't trending the right way, and we were down approximately 25%. But the number that was particularly glaring to me was the number of customers we had lost between 2012 and 2013.
Right.
And I looked at it as such a huge number. I didn't look at the gross revenue number that we lost. I looked at the number of customers that we lost. And I equated it to my experience in polling politically. And politicians live by polls. I don't care who it is. They make their decisions based on what the polls will tell you. And we would always look at numbers inside our polls, the real details. And within those numbers, you'd be able to see where we were soft and where we needed to improve our game.
Right.
And when I saw the number of customers that we had lost in a year's time, I knew that there was just a complete systematic breakdown within the operation.
Right.
And I had to start taking a more active role in learning the day-to-day operations as to what was wrong. And I needed to listen. And I needed to stop relying upon what I believed to be the experience of my partner and start to get back again to what I know best. Learn it, figure out how to process it, and move forward. And what I found was there were problems in the kitchen, there were problems in the delivery, there were problems with the pizza station, there were problems with our servers, there were problems with our bartenders.
Wow.
And I didn't find it in one quick swoop. It took time.
Sure. And resulted in 2015?
2014, May of 2014, I sat down with my other partner at the time.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I had told him in the months prior that the food wasn't right, that I was getting complaints from customers who had told me what was wrong. I had saw that deliveries were not timely. We have a very vast corporate clientele here.
Yes.
And one of the things that I always knew from my corporate experience is people who work in a corporate environment only have a short period of time for lunch. And when they order lunch and they say they need it there for 12 o'clock, it's got to be there at 11:50.
Right.
Because it's already late if you're there on time. They only have a short period of time to eat and get through the rest of their day. And I remember one day I got a call from a Morgan Stanley executive who told me, I don't understand how I could ask for pizzas to be delivered at 12:30. It's now 1 o'clock. Pizzas are still not here. And you guys are located right around the corner. And I realized at that particular moment, we were broken everywhere. Not in any, everywhere we were broken.
And so you decided to
2014,
buy out.
I approached my partner. I said, one of us has got to go because, again, there's a breakdown in our communication and what you believe is right in terms of running the operation and what I believe is right in running the operation. And I have deferred to you this entire time, having you being the person with more experience, and it's clearly not working. In fact, we keep losing, and I went to the numbers.
Yes.
And I remember his answer to me was, numbers don't matter. You can't go by that. Everything changes from year to year. And I said, if numbers don't matter, nobody would be in business. I said, they are a telltale sign. It's your Bible. And eventually we came to terms, and he was bought out in May of 2014. And my family and I came in here, and we started from the ground up. Started with changing over the kitchen, each person in the kitchen, making sure that we had responsible front of the house, meaning our waiters, our bartenders, making sure that we had a responsible pizza maker, making sure that we had a responsible delivery driver. And safe to say that it's now 2021, most of those staff members, most of our team is still here from that group of people that I brought in 2014. And they all subscribed to my theory of what I believed would be necessary in order to make this business successful.
Which we'll get into in much greater depth in subsequent videocasts.
That's right. And they've stayed on, and they've bought in, and they've bought in a big way. They're supportive of the business. They all feel part of it. They feel this is their family. Down to, I got a call this weekend, which I know is a little off course, but I got a call this weekend from Desiree, who's one of our managers and our bartender, who advised me that this coming Labor Day, she wanted to know if she could have access to the restaurant the Sunday of Labor Day so that she could have her wedding here. And so that was, she doesn't realize what it means to me, but it means a lot. And it's something that I'll express to her at some time, because she met her fiance here about
goodness.
3 years ago. And lo and behold, she's going to be using the location for her wedding. So
wonderful.
I think it kind of ties into my theory that I've been constantly pounding, which is we're family oriented, we're here, we're a team, and everyone's bought in. And when you have a team that buys in and they follow your lead, I think it's a formula for success.
And clearly, as a numbers man, you know that is the case when you look at your numbers from 2015 forward.
Absolutely. Each year we grew exponentially, and it was not easy. It was not an easy undertaking.
Sure.
But I recall specifically one evening taking out certain members of our team for a drink after work, and I said, if you guys just follow my lead, you're going to see some things that I do may be a little unorthodox and out of the realm. I said, but if you follow me, this place can do a tremendous amount of business, and we could all do well and enjoy ourselves. And they all followed, and numbers have just continued to increase. The business has grown. We've met such tremendous people. We've added people to our team who have, again, fit in well.
Yes.
And we've been blessed. We really have been blessed.
So, Anthony, what a surreal juxtaposition. You know, as a relative newcomer to the restaurant industry, you harness your instincts, your talents, your business and political experiences to create a successful restaurant that clearly bears your idiosyncratic stamp. And as I said before, we'll discuss all of this in much greater detail moving forward. But the context within which all of this occurred was extraordinarily dark. So to kind of sum it up, because it's hard to even believe until you sort of hear the list, so to speak. The restaurant was destroyed by a fire. Anthony's brother was killed in a car accident. Your indictment, your guilty plea, the years-long wait between indictment and sentencing, and you know, at that time, not knowing the very real possibility that you might go to prison.
Correct.
So you've spoken a little bit about it, but you know, how did you survive all those setbacks and tragedies and tolerate that 5.5-year gap between indictment and sentencing?
In as much as it's great to look back and look at the successes of having built a successful business, there were a lot of dark times. And those are dark times that undoubtedly have had an inherent negative impacts on my personal family. I hope as time goes by, everyone will adapt and grow into being tremendous young adults. They already are, but grow even more and use these terrible experiences that we all had to endure and become better people as they grow. There were a lot of dark times. You know, being in a business where you're uncertain as to whether or not you're doing the right thing, not knowing the business. You know, I often say to the people that we work with here that what I don't know about the restaurant business can fill up the Smithsonian. So I defer to them, who all have long-standing careers in the restaurant service industry, and ask their advice. But in those years prior to having been sentenced, a lot of dark times. You get into bad habits in this business, particularly when you have a full bar and all the alcohol that you can drink. You start to put yourself in bad positions, and it's not an excuse. It's a poor excuse, but
Not surprising either.
I'm not shocked by it. I'm not shocked by it, and that's why I believe that everyone is entitled to second and third, fourth chances, because everyone's circumstances are different, and you don't know what a person's going through particularly. And not to make any excuses, you just get into a dark place. You don't sleep at night, and you have self-doubt. You probably are not the best family man. And as a result, there are negative impacts that come along with that. And fortunately, we were able to get through it.
Well, perhaps that's an appropriate place to conclude our first videocast, because we hope, ladies and gentlemen, that you will stay tuned to our next videocast, when Anthony will be taking an even deeper dive into the ways in which the indictment impacted every single area of his life, and find out what happened when you were finally sentenced. So we will flesh all of this out in a lot more detail in the next videocast. We hope you will join us for it, and we thank you for being with us today and on this journey as we investigate Anthony's process.
Thank you so much.
Anthony.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you next